We have a lot of great information to share, and I believe at the end of our time together, we're also going to have an update on where we are with the generosity campaign. So that's some exciting news. But before we get going, before Jen jumps up and talks about finances, let me pray for us. So God, we come and we simply say this church, its mission, its place here on this campus and in the city and world is yours. Help us to know how to lead and serve in your name wherever we are. Thank you for the leaders that have served so faithfully this year and for those who are stepping up in the year ahead. Come now, Jesus. Be present at this meeting. We pray in Christ's name. Amen.
Thank you, Creighton. I want to talk just a little bit about the finances. This is our report as of this point in time. The financial status of the church, just like any other institution, including your family, is based on three factors: income, or in our case, giving, expenses or spending, and how much you have put aside. And I want to talk very briefly about giving, spending, and then assets and debits. First of all, I want to talk about the general operating fund giving based on a calendar year basis. That's based on January to actually November 9th of this year, just a little over 10 months. And I want to compare 2018 to 2019 of those for that period. And I'm looking only at giving to the general operating fund. In terms of pledges and loose offerings, we're ahead by about $30,000 from last year for this same period. Now, bear in mind that the actual amount really depends on how many Sundays have occurred during that period, when you have a finite period, and what might be going on in terms of attendance and other factors. So there's always a lot of variability here. So, there's a little bit of looseness there. The other source of giving, and these numbers are the same as you saw the last time because they occurred early in the year, are the pledges and prepaid gifts from prior year. That should be prepaid gifts and pledges rather than pledges and prepaid gifts. One-time gifts to operations, $5,000 last year, $98,000 this year, and that was due to a will that did not specify that it went into an endowment. The other interesting thing is the conference grant from Kindred. This number of 11,400 represents just 1 quarter last year. This year, it represents 3 quarters, and that's why there's such a significant difference. The bottom line is the total giving to operations, which is approximately $1,020,000 last year. This year, it's $1,140,000. The other thing that is of significance is the number of giving units. 427 last year, 425 this year. A non-significant difference. Now, more importantly now is the fiscal year. Remember, I've mentioned before that the fiscal year has changed. It used to be a calendar year. We think in calendar years when we give our gifts, but the church operates on the new fiscal year, which goes July 1st through June 30th. There's no 31 days in June. So what do we have for the first 4 months and 9 days of this fiscal year compared to the same period last year? Pledges and loose offerings, 386,000 last year, 391,000 this year. A little bit better, but it's kind of noise from an analytical standpoint. The one thing that might be of concern is the number of giving units during that period. In that 4-month period, last year there were 361 giving units. This year there were only 330 giving units. I will say something about that in a minute. The operating expenses, the next side of the second item in the equation is expenses or spending. Last year, during the 4 months, our non-staffing expenses were $180,000 in that period. This year, they're $210,000. Staffing costs last year were $314,000. This year, $323,000. That might cause a pause, but again, there's the cycle of when things are paid. But the important thing is that the staffing costs last year were 63.6% of all of our expenditures. This year, they're down to 60.7%. So proportionately, we're spending a little bit less. Again, I don't think it's a big difference. I don't think it's significant. What really stands out is our banking status, our assets and our debits. Last year at this time, we had $12,000 cash on hand. Now, this year, we had $76,500 cash on hand. Receivables, $25,700 and $14,500. Our bank loan went from $132,000 down to $103,000. And our debits, our line of credit went from $100,000 to $50,000. Last time I stood up here, we had nothing in our line of credit. And Mike has just recently moved $50,000 from the line of credit, or into the line of credit, right here, so that we could cover expenses without having to really worry about it. The other thing that I've been looking at is when we have the cash and receivables, what is the proportion of that, or how well does that cover our debts? So a year ago, we had enough cash and receivables to cover 0.16 of our debts. If we were to just write a check and not go into savings, not go into investments, but just out of cash and receivables. This year, we're at 0.6. We can cover 60% of our debt if we just wrote out a check and got our, paid with our receivables and what we have on hand. as a takeaway, with regard to the three key factors, even without a campaign, well, first of all, our finances are healthier than last year, despite the lack of, of a campaign to date. Today, we have the beginnings of what our campaign is looking like. But we have consistency in giving from 2018 to 2019, despite the fact that we have just entered into a campaign. We have continued to control our operational expenses. As of November 12th, our assets, cash and receivables, are higher than last year, and our debts, bank loans, are lower than the same time last year. We're in a pretty comfortable spot there. With regard to indicators, we're beginning, the Finance Committee is beginning to, instead of just looking at the bank sheets and the numbers, we're trying to come up with indicators, ratios, things that we can look at that can help us understand the health of the finances of the church. So a couple that I've been playing around with, and I've already shown you, staffing costs as a percent of operational expenses are constant this fiscal year, July through October, compared to the same time last year. We're not paying proportionately more for staff at this time. At this point in the fiscal year, the number of giving units is less than for the equivalent period last year. But the average contribution per unit in that 4-month period is up 11%, from $1,070 to $1,185. The fewer giving units are giving more each on average. This is all before the generosity campaign. And with the generosity campaign, we're hoping and praying that we will not only have more generous givers, but more givers, totally. And I've been instructed that we will hold questions to the end. So here is my...
And I'm going to ask you to be my helper. We'll see. I think he can do the job. I want to report for the Lay Leadership Committee for the work that we've been doing for this last year. You may remember, I think I've talked about, Sherry Dido and I talked at the town hall last year about the changes in our committee structure. We started this right before Justin came. We were in the process of it, and then with his guidance and leadership, we changed a bit from the committees, which, as those of you who have been on lay leadership or on a committee around over the years know, was lay leadership had to fill slots on between 40 and 50 committees a year. And people who were on these committees were asked to commit for 3 years. Well, that was getting harder and harder. So we wanted to be more nimble, more flexible, and so forth. So instead of having committees that were all staffed through nominations committee, lay leadership, we organized our committees into teams that were all part of 3 commissions. And you've probably seen the graphic with or 4 commissions actually, including administration. So there's a Discipleship and Nurture Committee. You're going to hear a commission. You're going to hear from Meredith about that a little bit later, I think right after me. And a Worship Commission and an Outreach Commission. So this is the first full year of operation in that structure. So we have been contacting team leaders, looking to see how this is going. It's an experiment, and it probably will need some tweaking. We see some possibilities in that already, but I think it's working well. We are asking people to identify a committee, I'm still using that term, team that is consistent with their interests, their passions, and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. So there's not a requirement for 3 years. If a team is doing a project that someone is interested in, they can say, I'd like to be a part of that. So that was a major change in our structure. So this year we were focusing on then nominations for the church council and for the 4 committees that are required by our discipline. That's finance, trustees, lay leadership, and SBRC. So we started this process back in the summer by trying to see if we could identify potential new leaders, knowing that many of us, some of us standing up here, right, Jan? Are ready to see some new people come into the leadership positions. And so with the help of the church office and Justin and other staff, we began with a long list of names. And we began making contacts with these folks, many of them, those that we could reach, to say, what are you interested in? We are looking for people who would have some talent and interest, particularly in these 4 committees, because they're still committees. And through that process, we were able to identify a number of new people who have not been in leadership positions before, but who will be coming in or may have been in leadership positions before, but not on one of these committees. So this has given us a lot of new blood, and I think new ideas, and it's the kind of growth that we want to see. So I'm going to show you the results of this nominations process by showing you the various committees and the church council. Now, I do have some hard copies of this. I know it's hard to see, and I'm not going to read out every name, but I will be happy to give you a copy of it to take with you. But you can see that this is trustees for next year, and the new members are Portia McLarnon, Wes Weaver, Craig Anderson, and Megan Tarrant. Next, Jan. Doing a good job. Staff parish, Kathleen will be the chair of that committee again next year. Jory Renner's term has been extended, and Andy Pamacal and Ann Weaver are new members of that committee. Next. Lay leadership. John Cooper, Ann Bingham, Stuart Brown, and Michelle Park will be the new members of that committee. Next. And Finance Committee, Jonathan Owens will be chair, David O'Lilla has agreed to be co-chair, and the new members are David Ward, Kim McCowan, and Tabitha Turner. And finally, the Church Council, Don Balcom is going to be chair. He has been a very faithful lay leader for a number of years, and I know will do a great job. Kathleen Templeton, as I said, would be the SPRC chair. Jonathan Owens, finance chair, he's new coming on. The trustees elect their own chair. You can change it, Jan. Kevin Huggins will succeed Meredith as the representative, the coordinator for discipleship and nurture. Kathleen Harold will be new as the worship coordinator. April Cooper of the outreach. Mary O'Lilla will continue as a member at large, as will Kelly Bratton. You can change it. And Jessica Brack will join the church council as an at-large member, and Jenny McClone will be the lay leader. So those are your new church council members and the discipline chairs. I just want to say that we have had a very active lay leadership committee this year. People have just stepped up, done a wonderful job. You can imagine making all the contacts that we've made, numbers of phone calls, emails, texts, trying to reach people in various modes. And I really, really, really appreciate all of the work that they have done. The people who are going off, in addition to me, are Linda Manor, Terry Hamlet, Hunter Walker, and Bill White. And I have to really give a shout out to Hunter Walker, who, as you know, grew up in this church as a young person, joined the committee, and then got accepted to graduate school in social work, and has been going back and forth to ECU. She did more than her share of making contacts and calling in when she couldn't be here, and so that's why she's leaving, because she's finishing up her program this year and then off to somewhere. And I'm sure she'll stay active in where she will be. So if you'd like a copy of these all on one page, let me know, and I have some here. So you're next. Oh, okay. All right, I'm sorry. All right, Adam is next. And you probably don't need help.
I can use all the help I can get. Thank you. Thank you, Ann and Jan. So I see that there are some of the members of the incoming new leaders here who will be commissioned in January, as well as outgoing leaders and ongoing leaders. But I think we should give a round of applause for the incoming folks to say thank you for agreeing to do that service for another year. So the other thing I want to mention, I'm here to give an update for the church council, with the primary focus being on the statement that I'll talk about in a moment that the church council has adopted. But I want to just mention that the statement, which is a statement of mission, vision, and strategies, is available on the church website in the members section, thanks to Creighton and our new program and communications staff person, Julia. It's now there in the church council section, along with the statement that talked about at the last town hall on the traditional plan. So you can find both there, along with the minutes of the church council meetings from this past year that have been approved thus far. So please take a look there if you're looking for a copy. Plus, Lisa has a few copies of the statement regarding mission, vision, and strategies available in print form if you'd like a copy afterwards, but we'll be going through the text on screen as well. So looking around and seeing the faces in this crowd, you know that visioning at University United Methodist Church is an ongoing, never-ending process. We're always looking at where are we going next. And just in this century, we started out with Vision 21. Many of you were involved in that in very critical ways. Thank you, Rita. And we followed that up, and this was all in the pre-2010 timeframe, followed that up with the Vision 21 Task Force that wound up adopting, among other things, came out with implementation plans for the Vision 21 report. But one of the things that resulted from that process in the end was a mission statement that we are all familiar with, that we seek to transform lives by loving God, serving others, and building Christian community. And I think, if my recollection is correct, Rita, you had a big hand in writing that. Is that the case? In any event, she's not acknowledging it. We have that statement that was adopted several years ago. We also have, since the Vision 21 and V21 Task Force, had a strategic planning team that was in place starting around 2012, and then a few years later, in 2015, we had a long-range facilities and planning team that Jan led. And then in 2017, with Steve Crouch's help as chair of Church Council, we started another visioning process with the Vision Identity Purpose Initiative. You'll recall that, followed up by holy listening sessions last year, which are very helpful to identify the concerns and opportunities perceived by the congregation. Earlier this year and late last year, we had the Mary's Path small team that looked at whether to proceed with the Kindred community, and we decided to go forward with that. And now, of course, we have the trustees are pursuing a master's facility planning study, which necessarily involves trying to figure out where we're going for the future. So the point of this recitation is simply to make the point that visioning and looking forward to the future is an ongoing process here. As we moved into the generosity campaign phase in the fall here, that ending in Commitment Sunday today, we thought it good to make a statement about where we are going forward from here, and so that we were clear and our clergy and staff were clear about the future direction as part of the messaging being developed for the generosity campaign. And based upon that, the Church Council, with Pastor Justin's help and leadership, approved a statement in September at the September 10th Church Council meeting, which you can find, as I mentioned, online. And that's the statement I want to review today. The statement has three elements: mission and vision and strategies. The mission is the mission statement we had with the addition of a kinship element. You know, we've been focused in sermons and otherwise in the church for a while now on kinship as a critical element of our mission. And so that's been added to the mission statement. On the vision, we have recognized our pursuit of planting churches as part of our vision, how we look forward to the future, with the creation of Kindred as a first community, in addition to our existing community, as a way of moving forward. And then on strategies, we identified 5 key objectives, and these are recognizing what we're currently working on. These are what we're trying to do now, and decided we should formalize what those strategies are. You've heard this before. I think Creighton spoke about it in a sermon he delivered not long ago, but I want to review the statement with you now. It starts out with a mission statement, and as I mentioned, this is essentially reaffirming our existing mission statement with the addition of the kinship element. So our mission as a church family is to live into radical kinship through loving God, serving others, and building Christian community. And the vision statement is a recognition of our decision to move forward with church planting, with the creation initially of Kindred, led by Pastor Daniel, and hopefully future additional communities once we have Kindred firmly established, and they're growing well. But we want to be one church family of Kindred communities. So the objective is, we talk about church planting, and people tend to think about church planting as churches that spin off. But our objective is to remain, as we see it now, one community, or one church family, that is, of multiple communities. And then the statement goes on with a couple of additional sentences to expand upon what that means. And part of that vision is to say, united in our vision of living into the radical kinship of God, we are deeply committed to relational discipleship, and you're going to hear more about discipleship from Meredith in a moment, formative worship, serving our neighbors, and the ministry of planting churches. So this is building on what we mean when we say what our vision is. And then we continue in this statement that through multiple geographies, diverse strategies, and distinctive expressions of these shared commitments, our kindred communities work in concert to share hope and kinship with our neighborhoods and world. Key elements here are we're going to do what it takes, whether that's multiple geographies, diverse strategies, distinct expressions. We're going to find ways to reach out to people who are not here in our existing communities to create additional communities. But we're going to work in concert. Again, one church family working in concert to share hope and kinship with our neighborhoods and the world. In the strategies section, there are 5 strategies. The first one is very simple. The strategy is increasing generosity, and we'll hear more about the generosity campaign, I understand, in a few moments. The second strategy is focused on our spaces for ministry. That is, we'll seek to create appropriate spaces for ministry that honor tradition but recognize the needs of contemporary worship. So that's the focus of this new facilities master planning project that is underway. The third strategy or objective is to plant new campuses, which is intended to refer to communities generally as opposed to physical campuses, I believe. But the point being to reach more people, more places with the gospel of Jesus Christ. And then finally, fourth strategy being connecting 100% of our active worshipers into small groups. We want to get people involved in small groups because that's the way of building kinship. And then finally, we want to recognize while we have many missions and many objectives, a core or key mission for us is focused on working to reduce and end the achievement and opportunity gap that exists in Chapel Hill and Carrboro schools, which has been pointed out, we have the worst gap in the country among schools, which is hard to believe, but we've chosen that as a church to move forward with as a key missional focus for us. So we'll take questions at the end of the presentation, as Jan has mentioned, and I'd like to turn it over to Meredith.
All right. I will start because I don't think I put this in my slides. I just wanted to explain briefly the coordinator position. So I started in January of 2018, and Kevin, as Ann said, Kevin Huggins will take my place in January. So I've served 2 years. However, going forward, I'm just letting you know in case anyone's interested, going forward, the coordinator will have been the vice coordinator for a year and then will serve as coordinator for a year. So this first time, it was just a little bit different as we're living into this new structure. But that's how the coordinator positions will work going forward. So, sorry. Okay, so this is the Discipleship and Nurture Commission. This is just a screenshot from the webpage, so you've probably seen this before. So I am the coordinator of the commission, and these are the little bubbles there are the different teams under my commission, or I should say the commission, not my commission. So I was appointed in January of 2018, and then I'm sure you'll remember in March and April of last year, we had the Holy Listening Sessions. And then that summer of 2018, is when these teams and the new commissions really began working in earnest and really started getting a feel for how this was going to go, how exactly we were going to work under this new structure. So these are the bubbles, as I like to call them. And every few months, I have had the pleasure of meeting with all of these team leaders. So the leaders of each of these teams meet every 3 to 4 months, And that has been truly the joy for me in this position, is getting to see all of these different folks come together that maybe otherwise wouldn't meet and talk with one another, and see how they can help each other, how they can work together to make this church better in terms of discipleship and nurture. So in addition to being on church council, the coordinator has this fun job as well. Okay, so what did we get out of those holy listening sessions? That was the big thing for me. Coming into this coordinator role, I wanted us to look at all of those comments from the holy listening sessions and kind of distill them down to some themes. What are some key themes that people really want at UUMC? So I don't have that on the slide, so I'm going to just read them really quickly. These were the themes that I found and then brought to my team leaders and said, hey, I think these are the things we should try to work on. People were craving more intergenerational offerings for nurture and discipleship. Whole family opportunities, but not just whole family, also intergenerational, because not everybody has a big family in this church. So across ages, people wanted more of that. People said that we have great small group and Sunday school ministries, but right now they feel really closed, because people are already in these great groups that they feel very comfortable with, and newcomers don't really know how to break in. And so there was this request for, let's have more of that. And also, can we please have more at night? That was a big deal. People who work wanted to be able to come to these things at night. More spiritual formation, more retreats, or actually I think the theme was bring back retreats, and then better communication. So I brought those themes to the commission, to the team leaders, and said, how can we start answering these calls that the congregation has given us? How can we answer the calls, and how can we do it in a sustainable way? And so this is what the teams have worked on. They have worked on extending both the breadth and the depth of our spiritual formation and nurture opportunities with 4 key things, and we'll go through these on the slides real quickly. First, with a focus on the intergenerational and whole family opportunities. More intentional connection between the sermons, the group study, and the independent study. How can we make that all seamless so we don't feel like our brains are bouncing around here and there? How can we make that all work together? A renewed and a refreshed focus on things that we already know are effective. A great example of that to me was, we know that for generations people have loved disciple Bible study. There are people here, I'm looking at one right now, who have done all of them, have gone through all 4. And Justin said, let's do the disciple fast track. And so we started that, and I did one in Toby's house. People that want to learn the whole Bible really in depth, they can now do the whole thing in a year. So again, renewed and refreshed focus on things that we already know work and people enjoy. And then finally, an eye toward the future. So, intergenerational and whole family opportunities. This is a picture of what happened this summer. If you saw it in the bulletin, or if you happened to stop by and see it for yourself, that is Family Feud. Charlie started a summer Sunday school offering that was geared toward the youth, but not limited toward the youth. Their younger siblings, their parents, their grandparents, any of you who just wanted to drop by. It was a way for us to get the teens in church over the summer, but also give us that intergenerational opportunity. B90, reading the Bible in 90 days for the last 2 summers, also gave us opportunities to do things together as a whole church. Rebecca has brought back Pre-K Fun Day. We have baby community events. Senior adults helping with children's ministry. Thank you so much to Jim and Sally for all of your hard work with that. So these are just some of the ways that we have really worked on our teams to get people together across the ages. Connection between sermons and independent study and group study, again. I've got B90 up there, and I've got a picture of an Advent study up there. These are times of the year that, as Toby likes to say, our head, our heart, and our hands are all aligned. So we try really hard, at least these times during the year. You can see up there I have summer, Advent, Lent, and generosity. We used to call that stewardship. We're not going to call it that anymore. So at least these 4 times during the year, we really try for the sermon series to link up with what people are talking about in Sunday school. What are they talking about in their small groups and their Bible studies? And I think that you all would probably agree with me. When I look back on the last however many years I've been here, the times that the church has felt most vibrant is when we're all on the same page, when we're all together doing the same thing and working towards a common goal. So this has been a really beautiful thing to see. Did I skip something? I feel like I did. No, okay. And then our eye toward the future. Answering our congregation's requests, again, in a really sustainable way. I like to say, I think I said this in church council in August when I gave this report. I said, this is not about giving everybody a free lollipop, one-off, one-and-done kind of thing. Let's think about how we can implement these things that the congregation has asked for, but do it in a way that really sticks and lasts. So I feel like we have looked at meaningful relationships across the ages. I feel like we have looked at the fact that people want connection. They want to feel connection to the whole church. As a Sunday school teacher, I can tell you that the youth really, really value that, and I think that's just one voice. That just happens to be one example, but I think we all value that. We all want to feel connected to our church. Just as an example, when Kindred was first starting, I said to the pastors, I think the youth would really enjoy hearing what's going on. Like, what is this about? And so Pastor Daniel came to our high school Sunday school class and sat down and said, hey, if you were going to go to a new church, what would you want? Like, what would make you go to a new church? And if you were going to bring a friend to our church, what would make you bring them or make you not want to bring them? And they had this great conversation. And when Pastor Daniel left, 2 of them pulled me aside and said, it feels so good when adults act like they care about us. So it's just that feeling of like we're not just in this one small group alone. This whole church is a community and a family. And I think, again, that's just one example. I think we all feel that way. And then finally, these opportunities for spiritual growth, both as individuals and in groups. Those are the things that we've looked at doing, again, in a sustainable way. We have new small groups. We have new Sunday school classes. Toby has done a great job of figuring out what times work, and through trial and error, we figure out when people will actually come. One of the really hard things about being a leader is people ask you for things and then they don't always show up when you offer them. So Toby's done a great job of figuring out how to deal with that. And what was the other thing I was going to say? I forgot. It just left my mind. I had something important to say and it left. So if you have any questions about discipleship, about nurture, about how to get more involved, I hope you'll talk to a pastor. You can talk to me for another month, then you can talk to Kevin. We would love more input on how to make these things happen that the congregation wants to see happen. And for me, as the first coordinator, I just kind of wanted us to get into a good rhythm and establish a really sound practice for being a commission. And I think it's gone really well. I'm so proud of the teams. But moving forward, I hope we can get creative and not just stay in this rhythm, but really break out of some boxes and do some cool things here. I added kinship because, as I said, I was getting this report together for church council in August. And I started listing, just for me, I started listing everything that these teams have done over the past year. And it was single-spaced, 2 pages long. And I thought, how in the world am I going to boil this all down for just a few minutes to present to church council? And then it dawned on me, this word that Justin keeps saying, that 2-page list all boiled down to that. It all boiled down to kinship. We want to be together. We need each other. And so I just had to add that last word because I really do think that is what we're looking for when we look towards the future on discipleship and nurture and as a whole church. So again, if you have any questions, feel free to talk to me later. And Creighton, I think you're up, or Justin's up. Okay.
Thank you, Meredith, and everyone who's presented. We'll say one other thing related to discipleship and nurture and related to something Meredith said. So, in the listening sessions, we had long lists of things that folks wanted. As you mentioned, at retreats, people would say we need to do more potlucks and things like that. And as Meredith said, there's sometimes a little bit of a gap between what folks would really like to see really what that sometimes means is I really want somebody to talk about having done this because I would enjoy that because I once did it, but I don't know if I really want to do it now. And so we're trying to create experiences that people want to be a part of. We did a small all-church retreat that coincided with the youth retreat this fall, and so we will hope to do that again. And so that's the important thing. There you go, reading your mind. I was there. So I hope that you'll look towards these kinds of things that'll help us create all church and church family activities. All right, so this is the Q&A time, and I've been given the role of emceeing it. I think Adam designated this role because he figured I was going to talk most anyway, so might as well hand me a microphone. So, if you have any questions, now is the time.
This was all very positive and inspirational, and so I don't want to take us in a negative direction, but I will from the standpoint of the number of giving units has gone down in this current fiscal year, right? Would love to get yours or Jan's or Mike's just informal thoughts about it. Obviously, we've had one major thing that's happened, which is the church as a whole took a fairly strong stance with regard to sexual minorities, which was not popular in this congregation. Do we have any sense as to whether or not we were losing members or financial support in response to that?
Yeah.
As well as any other interpretations.
Right, I'm going to choose the light shining on you as a divine sign to ask softball questions for the first, but just, reminder. No, Mike, since you're sitting right next to him, I'll let you take the first pass at that, and then I'll answer some of the more congregational, mood-centered parts of it. Yeah.
So first of all, I have not seen that we've had any major exodus from the church. There really hasn't been anyone that we can, other than, moving away and things like that, that we're aware of moving. I think the lower number of giving units is due to the fact that we did not have a campaign push. And so most of that comes in the lower, I hate to say lower end, but the givers who either maybe just put, $4 or $5 dollars in the plate a week, and we knew who they were, and now we don't because they didn't pledge or they're not turning in a card, or because we didn't push, they have not given. And so, the giving numbers across the board are up, even though, and actually it's only just the last 4 months where they've been down. And I think part of that also has to do with people anticipating the generosity campaign and getting their pledge ready for that. And then purposely we've cut out one of our updates to individuals on where they're at giving because we didn't want it to interfere with the generosity campaign language. So if you haven't received a giving statement in the last couple of months, you're going to get at least 2 of them between now and the end of the year, now that the generosity campaign's over. Like I say, I haven't identified a group of people who aren't giving. I just think it's, a little bit here or there.
Right. So another thing I'd say is anytime a church makes a strong stance on anything, I expect that there will be a handful of folks who migrate. Now, like Mike has said, he's not seeing any kind of mass exodus or anything like that, but I do think that clarity, and we're in a season right now where we're trying to create lots of clarity about who we are, clarity about what we're going to do locally to be in mission together, clarity about how we're going to do life together inside of this congregation. And so clarity tends to do a couple things. It helps people who feel a sense of synergy based on the clarity to draw closer together. And it makes folks who feel less inspired to say, well, maybe this is not for me. That happens, and it happens in any kind of organization or institution that does similar work. The hope, however, is that the increased clarity and synergy will become more attractional, so that as that gels together, it provides an opportunity for people to connect with others and say, look, if you're really about this, come here. Or people who shop around for churches online, which we're now seeing that people do for weeks before they even attend someplace, to say, all right, this is the kind of community for me. And so all of what we're working on related to these strategies and the greater focus on certain language is meant to create a kind of a clarity that we hope will become more catalytic as the months go on for the growth of all of our kindred communities that are forming here around University Church. Brother Charlie has a question. And then I think Jim is the next in line.
No, I just wanted to say thanks to Jim Coker for getting our provost of the university to come over and talk to us at a recent Joy group. And that was an excellent thing to have attended. We got a lot of information about what was going to happen with the buildings right down the street and how closely we were involved with their planning process. And I was impressed with that, and you might want to comment on it.
Yeah, absolutely. So as we had intended to have our master plan completed by the end of our calendar year. However, as the UNC released their master plan, we discovered that the first phase of that is work on North Campus, Porthole Alley, and creating a new visitor center and an admissions center. Some designated users haven't been identified yet, but we know that will be there. So dramatic change next door to us that would impact parking, that would have a certain amount of time of disruption around just construction and what construction does. A new large facility by us, and what does that do to the look of this part of downtown? So many kinds of things that we're concerned about. And so over the years, Mike has tended to faithfully relationship with those who on the campus who deal with facilities. And some of that is just simple things like parking and what's going to be available to us and what events are on campus. But Mike has stewarded those relationships over the years. And so we invited them to come and meet with us. And so Vice Chancellor came by, and then her team of folks working on North Campus. And so we got UNC's top brass related to facilities planning to meet with us and with our architect. And there will be another meeting. Was it tomorrow? Is it tomorrow? Our architect's coming back in to walk the area with UNC's architect and begin to vision together about what's possible here. And the hope is to create a situation that creates a more optimal rather than a less optimal parking situation for us adjacent to our campus, but certainly so that we can be thoughtful together. And it's really exciting, and it's exciting to see the spirit with which the university is entering into those conversations and the openness. It's also really good that we began conversation with them before they had anything formalized. And so it's really good, really good. So y'all, give Mike and Attaboy after, and tell, Rosemary that she's got the best and husband and all that kind of stuff. So So it's really good. We're really excited about that process, and UNC will have additional meetings into the early part of 2020, and we'll have conversations throughout so that we hope to conclude our master plan having understood what they're planning on doing more toward mid-late spring. Add a lighting situation. All right, yes. Yes. I mean, it's one of the things that we're concerned about. I mean, if it is a multi-story structure next door to us, what does it do? Yes, for the light flowing inside our facility. What does it do for sight lines as you're driving down Franklin Street? I mean, lots of things we're talking to them about. Yeah. All right.
That meeting was a great success, and a big part of that was because Justin introduced the provost and hosted the meeting and moderated with Q&A session afterwards. And it ended on an especially high note because Justin turned to the provost and said, "Would you like any final word?" And the provost said, "Yes, let's sing happy birthday to Justin," which we did because it was his birthday. It was just a sensational way to end it. But I want to say something about finances and generosity. First, I want to say that I love these town halls. I just think these are wonderful events. And Sally and I couldn't be at the last one, but because they are on our YouTube channel, we watched it. I'm so grateful that everyone includes a finance report. It's great to hear, very reassuring to know that our finances are so healthy. I know that's due to a lot of special things, the stewardship of finance committee and trustees and staff and clergy and everyone. Jan made the point at the last meeting, and this is despite not having a stewardship campaign. So why should we have one? Well, of course, we're just now at a climax of our generosity campaign. Why have we done this? Why did we need this? Well, we have come to learn that our giving should be fundamentally about our relationship with God and Christ and our faith and this church. And so that should be at the forefront. But also, we do need to have more giving. I'm sure everybody here and the rest of our of this congregation, for the most part, we love what we have. We love our clergy. We love our staff. We love the ministries. We love the programming. We want to fully support them and do more. And so I noticed, I wasn't here, but I saw it on screen, that this past year, our finances are in good health partly because there was a 90,000 something increase in one-time giving. Jan neglected to say anything about it the last time, but this time he said it was because of proceeds from someone's will that was not designated for some other purpose so it could be used. So our finances would not be in good health without that. So we need to give more just to support what we have. But we want to do more than that. So that's what motivates also the generosity campaign. It's not only about our own relationships with our faith and with this church, but because we do need the resources. So it's my prayer, and I know it's shared by everyone here, that most all of us will have been inspired by this campaign to examine our relationship with our faith and with this church, and to have made a significant increase to better reflect that, as Sally and I have done, and I hope everyone else will as well. And anyway, keep up the good work with these town halls and with all the parts of the program.
Amen. It's like if you had a kid, the kid could be a preacher. As y'all know, they do, and he is.
Justin, I would say, I think Jan may have at some point numbers to report from the campaign, and there's also a video following that next slide on the campaign.
Yes, and we'll do that in a moment. Just maybe one more question, and then I'll give a usual kind of general church update because y'all enjoy those. Yeah.
I had a question about our summer worship services.
Yes.
And I was talking to 4 or 5 members this week, and it was brought up about that. And all 5 of us really would like just a 10 o'clock service. And I know that's been an ongoing thing, but I know my sister in South Carolina at a Methodist church, but they do the 10 o'clock. But one of the main reasons that they said it was it would be really nice to see everybody. I mean, so whoever works on that, give it a lot of thought.
Yeah, we have talked about it a bit on staff with our staff related to worship, and then in our general staff. And we talked about it for last summer as well. By the time we were really at a point of saying, gosh, maybe we should do this, the amount of time to communicate that to the congregation was a bit compressed. And I've got a sense that one of the things that we don't want to do is to, just a handful of weeks before something say, all right, this is what we're going to do, because that doesn't give enough time for that information to flow through the entire of the congregation. But there's a lot of willingness for us to do that this coming summer. So thank you for that additional feedback as well. So just briefly, one of the things that we do know is coming up will be a general conference this coming May. And, there'll be drips of information. And then certainly as we get closer to the time, more information will become clear. I just heard a presentation yesterday from WestPath, which is our pension and health benefits, our United Methodist Church pension and health benefits program. And, they have a vested interest in making sure that whatever way the denomination moves forward is clear, because they're going to have to resource whatever happens. And one of the proposals that they are keen on, though it would have it would not necessarily have any bearing on things like, human sexuality. There are different parts of the discipline that you can amend. And so this would amend structure, but would not necessarily amend any of those doctrinal pieces that we, and those stances that we currently hold. But this would be to create a United States jurisdiction. And so you'd have essentially, jurisdiction conferences, central jurisdiction conferences outside of the United States context, and then the U.S. context would be different, so that you could create a different versions of United Methodism that are more context specific. And the reason this is important for things like pension and health benefits is they can't make any nimble decisions currently in between general conferences. Why? Because you have to get everybody together, and then folks who are voting outside of the U.S. context end up having to spend a lot of time voting on things, dollar issues that will not affect them at all. And so little things like changes in how we think about moving expenses, non-tax versus taxable income. Well, there's no way for them to, for the pension and health benefits to respond except for waiting for these major general conference increments. So that's just one small example of how this would benefit them. In another way, it does help us to move towards having conversations that are U.S. specific, which has been a great part of the tension around these general conferences. We essentially spread as a denomination in a slightly colonialist way, and then maintained it, maybe not even slightly, but then maintained it very firmly while it benefited us in the U.S. context. When it creates tensions for us, then we don't exactly know what to do with it. And so for there to be a core parts of a book of discipline that unites the globe, but then other local expressions for different parts of the globe simply makes sense for the group that can't get into pension and health benefits, cannot get into any of our theological differences. They've got to actually be able to manage the system well. And so this is one of those proposals that they are encouraging. There's also been a complete rewrite of the social principles that has been put forward for us to vote on as well. And so that, that certainly has implications for certain other stances that we would be concerned about. So there's a lot of new legislation that is coming before the General Conference that I'm just starting to read over and to think about the implications there. There's one other thing that I'd mentioned. There's a bishop from Sierra Leone, Bishop Yambasu, who's called together a group of progressives and traditionalists to think about the life of the church. And there is some hope that that group of folks might be a little bit more unitive, but also might be able to help when we are having these conversations for, jurisdictional conferences that might be different in one context than the other. So that's just a brief update for those who are interested in these things as they roll along. So now, I think there's a drum roll on, Jan, you've got some numbers that Mike has given, some initial numbers from this morning.
Okay. Right here.
In your wallet?
All right. This morning, the cards that were collected have been tallied. There were 151 estimate cards for a total of $804,260, with an average of $5,326.23.
Thank you. So, Mike, I don't know if you have any other commentary on this. I mean, this is different than we've done it before, so you don't have quite much to relate it to.
I don't know the correlation between individuals, so I can't say who went up and who went down. We have about between 35 and 40% of our total givers that have pledged. And we have right now a very high pledge average, so I'm encouraged greatly. If we receive the other approximately 220 to 230 pledges at the same giving rate, I think you all can kind of figure that out. But right now, that was a very good number. It's also a very high number for our traditional Pledge Sunday. We usually don't have that many cards that we've either gotten given back or mailed back for that amount. So right now it's very encouraging. So.
All right, that's it. And then I think y'all want to play you were going to play okay, I've got a 4-minute video, and then after that we'll say goodbye. All right, thanks you all. Have a great afternoon. Blessings.